God bless America. Hello, everybody. I am the Talk Radio Protege. This is the Protege program. Thank you so much for joining me. I want to sprint through a few news stories today. It's probably going to be a short video. Let's just get right into it, shall we? I'll begin with this one. It's an opinion piece from Tammy Bruce over at Fox News, but I want to focus on the quotes that Tammy brings up for us much more than the opinion that she leaves with these quotes. So she's talking about a Netroots Nation political, I think it's a PAC that happens out in California probably every year, the Netroots Nation Political Activism Conference, and she is talking about something that Kamala Harris said, and I want to look at those quotes today. Ms. Harris, widely believed to be eyeing a presidential run, is doing what good progressives do. She engaged in promoting identity politics at the conference and then told everyone that the phrase identity politics was a pejorative. Quote, now, I am aware that some people would say that what I just said is plain identity politics, but I have a problem, guys, with that phrase, identity politics, because let's be clear, when people say that, it's a pejorative. That phrase is used to divide, and it is used to distract. She quotes, she reads off that quote that Breitbart has reported on. Now, I want you to understand the hilarity and the hypocrisy behind this quote. What is identity politics? Identitarianism, by definition. Identitarianism is when you divide up people according to the way they were born, pretty much. Mostly the way they were born. In some cases, the ways that you choose to identify. And they say that you, as a black, female, lesbian, atheist, cannot have the same interests as a Jewish, male, bisexual, transgender, continue, just slap whatever labels onto two different people. They can't have the same interests if they don't have the same identity. That is identity politics. That is identitarianism. And it divides people against each other by their prescripted identity. And I call it prescripted identity because it's something that you didn't get to choose for the most part. There's some parts of that identity that are chosen. For a lot of people, sexuality is a chosen thing. It's an issue of preference, and it's choosing to indulge in a preference. I could really get off in the weeds. I'm just going to stop myself right there. So, identity politics is all about saying that you belong in this group and you have these interests, and you belong in this group and you have these interests, and you guys' interests compete. All of the different groups' interests compete with each other. It is why identity politics is why the left is eating itself. You've probably heard that phrase going around the internet a little bit recently, and if you watch some of the same creators that I do on YouTube, you may have seen people talking about recently some research that came out that found that censorship on American college campuses targets more on the left than it does on the right. It ends up shutting down more left-wingers than right-wingers. And there's a couple of explanations for this, and I won't get too far off into both of them today, but leave a comment if you want some more details. One explanation is there are the vast majority of people on college campuses are left-wingers, so any time an event of censorship occurs, you're just statistically more likely to be censoring a left-winger than you are a right-winger. The second reason this could be the case is because of identity politics. Identity politics says your group is in competition with all of the other groups. And it can't be any other way. Your group can only compete, they cannot cooperate, can only compete with these other groups. So if anybody ever comes out and they're pushing things, especially if they're pushing policies that are very easily labeled as competitive with other quote-unquote minority groups in the progressive stack, then it becomes very easy to shut those people down. And it becomes even easier when those people are on the left and when they subscribe to identity politics and they acknowledge that, yes, according to my worldview, you have a legitimate grievance against me, therefore I am going to shut up, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to stop talking. So, that all being said, I want to summarize the hypocrisy of this statement, that endorsing identity politics and then saying, I don't like the phrase identity politics because it is divisive. I want to summarize that for you. And if you find this hilarious and confusing, you and I are on the same page. Dividing the populace against each other along identitarian lines is not divisive. But pointing out that the left is dividing the populace against each other along identitarian lines is divisive. If that is hilarious and or confusing to you, you and I are on the same page. Now, I want to talk about another story now. I want to go to another Fox News column, headline, Trump supporters will, quote-unquote, provoke violence when he leaves office, according to one women's studies professor from the State University of New York at Albany. And I want to read the full quote for you. I believe that Trumpers, the core supporters Trump has bound to himself through his consistent and persistent messaging, will not accept as legitimate any means through which he departs from the presidency. Let's you and I think back on all of the most hated presidents of living memory. I think the oldest living president is Jimmy Carter. So you can go Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, Bush 1, Bill Clinton, Bush 2, Obama, Trump. Those are the presidents in living memory. Which presidents had their supporters riot after an election? Did any of... wow, his name just flew from my mind. Did any of Jimmy Carter's supporters riot after his election? I don't think so. I haven't read anything about that. I wasn't alive for those elections. To my knowledge, the answer is no. Did any of Ronald Reagan's supporters riot after any elections? To my knowledge, the answer is also no. Ronald Reagan was also, if my facts are correct, then Ronald Reagan was one of the more popular presidents when he left office, and as this same professor claims, where is it? Where is it? They will. She argued that even if Trump finishes his second term as president, they will vociferously demand that he be permitted a third term. If a president like Donald Trump, whose approval numbers are around 50-50, is going to elicit this kind of reaction, then how did a president like Ronald Reagan not elicit a similar reaction when he left office? And if my recollection, if my knowledge is correct, he was more popular than Trump is now. Maybe I've got my facts wrong. Somebody let me know. Let's move along. Bush number 1. He was a one-term president. Did any of his supporters riot after an election? I don't think so. Again, I wasn't alive back then. I don't think so. Did any of Bill Clinton's supporters riot after an election? I was alive at that point. I don't believe that I heard... I don't remember hearing reports that Bill Clinton supporters were rioting after the election. George Bush II, he was one of the least popular presidents when he left office. Did any of his supporters riot after the election took place? After the 2004 election or the 2008 election, did any of his supporters riot? I don't think so. President Barack Obama, did any of his supporters riot after the election? After which he left office? I'll give you a few seconds to mull it over, and you might not have to mull it over very long. There was, in biblical terms, weeping and gnashing of teeth after Barack Obama's anointed successor, Hillary Clinton, was defeated in the 2016 election. Now, they didn't riot, but it wasn't long after. It was January 20th, 2017, when the very first Antifa riots broke out in the United States of America that I can recall. And cars were burned, storefronts were smashed, people were assaulted as left-wing supporters rioted in the streets because their anointed candidate didn't win the election. All of the evidence points to nobody on the right wing will riot when their candidates lose an election, but there are chances that left-wing supporters will riot after an election. So I don't know where this women's studies professor, by the way, I don't know if I showed you the line where she is documented as a women's studies professor, gets off saying that Trump supporters are going to riot once he has to leave office. I also don't understand, there's a kind of a throwaway line here at the end of the story. I don't understand where this women's studies professor gets off getting to teach American federalism at a publicly funded university. Next story that I want to talk about, this one from the New York Post. It's an opinion piece by Michael Goodwin, and the headline is "Why It's Time for Trump to Play His Ace in the Hole." An alternative headline might be, "Why hasn't Trump declassified classified information related to the Russia probe?" Now, we won't go through everything in detail here. I'm going to give you the spoiler alert version of the column. Michael Goodwin says that Trump could end this Russia scandal with one stroke of his pen. He could declassify all of the related information in regards to Russian collusion and the investigation. And there are two reasons that I've heard floated, and I tend to believe that the truth is probably a mixture of the two when it comes to why Trump hasn't declassified this information yet. The first theory is that he likes to play the victim. Trump likes to go out there and say, look at what the evil swamp is doing to try and keep your elected representative from doing the things that you elected him to do. I think there is some truth to this argument, because look at how successful Obama was in saying, look, I'm just trying to change things, and the system is working against me. Obama, for his entire 8 terms as president, successfully never became a member of the establishment. He was always the guy on the outside. He was learning things at the last minute, just like you and I were. And he was having to fight the system, and the system was fighting against him. And I think that Trump probably sees that there is great use to having that status, to having the status of being an outsider fighting against the system. It's a very populist tool, and he probably thinks that as a part of his campaign platform, it's a useful tool for him to keep using throughout his presidency. The other thing that I think is part of the reason why he hasn't declassified this information yet is that he doesn't want to be seen as interfering with the investigation. Now, it's a lose-lose situation. Trump is already being smeared as having obstructed justice just by doing things that the left wing wanted done before Trump did them. Remember, before Comey got fired, the left hated, despised Comey because allegedly he cost Hillary Clinton the election. Within moments, Trump fires Comey. Moments later, the marching orders are, Comey is the saint of DC. He is the saint of the FBI. And we all love and adore Comey. The marching orders changed so fast that the rank and file of the Democrat Party were called Trump supporters by Stephen Colbert on his live television show. Some of you might remember that happening. But I think Trump still thinks that he has a chance of swaying some of these frothing at the mouth Trump suffering from Trump derangement syndrome Democrats by trying to be a fair person, by trying to let the system do what it was designed to do. Now, it's not designed to serve the interests of the American people. It's designed to perpetuate its own existence. That's the nature of a bureaucracy. But I think Trump thinks that there is value in allowing the investigation to proceed with as little of his personal input as possible. The last story that I want to talk about here, and I've got about 15 minutes left, so I think that's actually perfect. I think that's about as much time as I'm going to need to talk about this. There's a Pew Research Center poll out recently that polled how Trump voters feel towards Trump. They call it a heat feeling index or something to that effect. And the very warm feelings that Trump voters had right around the time of the election have persisted throughout the first 2 years of his presidency. Here's the chart you can see. It seems funny to me that during the primary campaign, there were not great feelings for the president, and I think that speaks to conservatives wanting a more genuine conservative to represent them in the Republican election. And I think it's just very bad luck that, at least bad luck for Ted Cruz, that Trump came along and campaigned the way that he did. He kind of swept the outsider rug out from under Ted Cruz because of the campaign that he ran. You know, Ted Cruz is a very staunch conservative. He was one of the greatest conservative senators that is currently in Congress. And I think he would have been a terrific president. He possibly could have been a better president than Donald Trump in terms of policy and presidentiality, as far as traditional presidentiality goes. But Trump has been a great president, especially compared to Hillary Clinton. He's been astronomically better than Hillary Clinton would have been. And I think that Cruz would have been even better than that as far as policy goes. And I think that the lesser degree of warmth that Trump voters felt about him during the primary speaks to their desire to have someone more conservative even than Trump. That all being said, by the time the election rolled around and after the election, they had warmed up greatly to Trump. And I think that what the media had been doing, or has been doing rather, has helped that along, has helped Trump voters become more warm towards the president. Now, I want to point out here, I think it's crucial that we point out here, that that Trump voters, and this is a poll of Trump voters, this is not a poll of all voters specifically. If I'm not mistaken, this is a poll of Trump voters. There are some Trump voters that don't feel great about the president. In fact, the number of Trump voters that don't feel great about the president has grown over time. Now, this doesn't mean that those people are not going to vote for Trump come 2020. It doesn't mean that they're not going to vote Republican this year. It just means that that they could be more pleased with something that Trump is doing as the president, whether that be his policy proposals or his rhetoric or his presidentiality. It could be any number of things. It could just be that at the time of the election, there were Trump voters that thought that reasoned with themselves, I have to feel good about this president, about this candidate to vote for him. And therefore, when they came out of that election and responded to this poll the first time, they said, yeah, I feel good enough about the president to write him as warm. But now, those feelings, now that they don't have to vote for Trump over Hillary Clinton, they've allowed themselves to back down off of that position that they thought they had to hold. And this is just pure speculation by my part. The last thing that I want to point out as part of this video is, well, it doesn't matter, I didn't need that page anymore, is the stretching that the Los Angeles Times has done in their reporting on this column, on this poll. The headline reads like this: Trump's core support remains solid, but a significant minority of Republicans have soured. Now, what on earth does a significant minority mean? Just a question that I have for you all. What exactly is a significant minority? Is a significant minority the people that voted for Hillary Clinton? Because that was a lot of people, and it turned out to be a minority of the Electoral College. But it was still a majority in terms of strictly population count. It was a majority of people. It was a terrible minority of the Electoral College, but it was a majority of the raw people. Is that a significant minority? Well, if you read down through this Los Angeles Times piece, and I would like to close that little banner down there, I'm afraid that I'll end up trying to navigate away from the piece. Nearly 1 in 5 Trump voters from 2016 have soured on him since he took office. Now, 1 in 5 amounts to 20%. That's less than half of a minority. If that is a significant minority, then fine. It just seems like contradictory to call a minority significant. Now, they say that the significant minority has soured. What I want to point out is that that does not mean that the significant minority has turned their backs on Trump. Now, in some policy decisions, I could be a member of this significant minority. There are some things that Trump has done and said, some policy prescriptions that he has strangely flirted with, that I think are absolutely the wrong policy decisions. For instance, that line that he dropped in the gun control roundtable, where he said, maybe take the guns and do due process later. That was a very sour note for me of the president's policy flirtations. But I'm still going to vote for President Trump in 2020. If the choice is President Trump and a Democrat, unless the Democrat happens to be like Ted Cruz, I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. So maybe I'm one of these people that has soured. I don't know. I wasn't given the opportunity to respond to this poll, so I don't know. Who knows? Maybe I think that the Times is just reaching to try and present any negativity out of this poll that they can. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. Leave a like if you did. Hit subscribe and hit the bell for notifications if you want to see future content like this. You don't want to miss out on future videos if you enjoyed this one. Make sure that you check back tomorrow for a new report. Again, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, good night and God bless.